The usual place for the nucleus is on the last content word, the last lexical word, as against function word. Next example. Is it going to rain hard this afternoon? I wouldn't have thought so. I wouldn't have thought so. I wouldn't have thought so. Where's the onset? Wouldn't. And the nucleus, thought. I wouldn't have thought so. There we've got the four-rise nucleus, thought so. But the nucleus is thought. So is not a content word, it's a function word. It means I wouldn't have thought that it was going to rain. Well, you can't be sure. You can't be sure. Where's the onset? You can't be sure. Can't. And the nucleus is sure. You can't be sure. Again, I've done it with a full rise. But what I'm doing at the moment is independent of the choice of fall or rise or full rise or whatever. What we're concentrating on is which syllable bears the nucleus. If only I'd asked him, I'm sure he'd have come. If only I'd asked him, I'm sure he'd have come. Two groups there, two tone units. If only I'd asked him, the first one has got an onset on only. If only I'd asked him, nucleus unasked. Him, a pronoun, so it doesn't get the nucleus. If only I'd asked him, I'm sure he'd have come. Where's the onset in the second one? I'm sure. Okay, I'm sure he'd have come. And the nucleus at the end. Come. Right, well, the typical function of the nucleus is to highlight, to emphasize, to highlight new information. We have to distinguish between information that is already in some sense given or known and information that is new. In our message, we want to concentrate on the new information. And that's where we put the nucleus. And this normally means 3.1, if all the information is new, then the nucleus usually falls on the last content word, because everything is new. I might say to you, are you enjoying the course? You could answer, well, I don't like the heat. Well, I don't like the heat. Now, that's all new information. So the nucleus goes on the heat, because that's the last bit of new information, the last content word. Well, I don't like the heat. And I'm sorry, by the way, that we don't have air conditioning in England. This is because it's so rare for us to have a day that is hot enough to require air conditioning that we don't install it. Well, I hope that's clear then that the basic normal place is on the last content word. The rest of this lecture is discussing circumstances where it goes somewhere else, not on the last content word. 3.2, well, even if some of the information is repeated, but the last word has new information, then that last content word gets the nucleus. What do you think of this weather? All right, we're already talking about weather, the fact that it's weather is given. Well, I don't like the heat. We're adding something new. If I say, what do you think of this weather? And the answer was, well, I don't like this weather, then it would have to be, well, I don't like this weather, because weather would be given. But since heat is something new, it gets the nucleus. All right, then, 3.3, if the last content word represents old information, given information, then the nucleus goes earlier. The nucleus goes on the nearest preceding content word that does contain new information. So if I say, what do you think of the heat? And you answer, well, I don't like the heat. Now, heat is repeated there, so the nucleus goes on like. Well, I don't like the heat. I don't like the heat. Like is the new information, so that's where the nucleus goes. Well, I don't like the heat. We can say then that we de-accent, we remove accent from the old information, and by de-accenting it, we push it back into the background, and we bring to the foreground the new information. Second example, if I say to you now, who doesn't like the heat? And you wanted to answer, well, I don't like the heat. You can see that don't like the heat is all repeated. The only new thing is I. Now, even though that's a pronoun, therefore a function word, because it's adding new information, it can get the nucleus. So I don't like the heat. Who doesn't like the heat? Well, I don't like the heat. The third example here, supposing you've just been answering the telephone, and you come in and you say, that was Muriel on the phone. Notice, by the way, the nucleus there will be on Muriel because we know you've been answering the phone, so the phone is not you. That was Muriel on the phone. The other person says, oh yes, she said she'd ring. Now this is more subtle, you see. Ring means the same as telephone. To ring someone up is to telephone somebody. So it's not a matter of repeating the same words necessarily, but of repeating the same meaning. And we don't put the nucleus on a word that repeats information already given, whether it's the same words or whether it's something that means the same. On the phone, it's the same as ringing. Ah, yes, she said she'd ring. It would sound odd if you said, that was Muriel on the phone. Ah, yes, she said she'd ring. That sounds as if the person didn't understand what was said to them. Because by your intonation pattern, you not only indicate your own meaning, but you indicate to your interlocutor, to the person you're talking to, what you have grasped of what they say. And this is why mistakes in intonation can be very disturbing for the person you're talking to, because they tend to imply that you haven't understood accurately what was said to you in cases like this. Okay, 3.4 then. Repeated items, old information, are usually de-accented. And this applies even if we use a synonym. So, next example, oh, Mr. Jones has got a dog. You might say, what breed of dog? Now, do you see why that is? Why don't we say what breed of dog? Because dog is repeated information. Oh, Mr. Jones has got a dog. We know it's a dog. What breed of dog? Well, the answer might be, well, I don't know the names of breeds of dogs. Now here, breed of dog is old information already. So the nucleus goes on names. Well, I don't know the names of breeds of dogs, but it was a brown dog. Dog is given, brown is the new information. So, you see how that's all logical. Oh, Mr. Jones has got a dog. What breed of dog? Well, I don't know the names of breeds of dogs, but it was a brown dog. Native speakers tend to do all of this, of course, entirely without thinking. Some of you have the same principles in your own language, so you really only need to concentrate on the occasional differences between your language and English. Others of you may not have this kind of system at all in your language, in which case you have to think about it carefully. Look at the next example. I say, shall we walk? And you answer, yes, I like going on foot. Now, do you see the point here? Walking is given. Going on foot is the same as walking. So it's not new. It's given information. The emphasis, therefore, must be on the liking it. That's the new information. Yes, I like going on foot. You're coming to introduce yourself to the new manager. I've already met Mr. Jenkins. That, of course, is if the new manager's name is Mr. Jenkins. I already know this, and so I can replace the words the new manager by Mr. Jenkins. It's synonymous. But because it's old information, it's a repeated item, the nucleus goes earlier. You're coming to introduce yourself to the new manager. I've already met Mr. Jenkins. Notice we'd also do this with him. I've already met him. Pronouns, obviously, unaccented. And this also applies in things like, I've already met the old bore. All implies. This implies that we know that Mr. Jacobs, the new manager, is an old bore. I've already met the old bore. I've already met the silly fool. Looking at the weather, I might say, I thought it was going to rain. Now there, rain is new information, so it gets the nucleus. But supposing I say, I thought it was going to be sunny. It is sunny. Will I say, I thought it was going to be sunny? No. That doesn't make sense in the context. It's pragmatically inappropriate. Seeing this lovely sunshine, I could say, I thought it was going to be sunny. Now, it's not always the case that repeated items avoid the nucleus, because sometimes a repeated item may nevertheless be important for the meaning. As, for example, when you ask someone an alternative question, would you like tea or coffee? Clearly, you want them to tell you which, and if they say coffee, please, then coffee, although it's repeated in some sense, it has to be accented anew because it's new information, but that's the one you're choosing. Even though the word is repeated, the information is new. Now, 3.5, another fairly subtle meaning difference. Sometimes we reply using a word that has a broader or narrower meaning, but is in general sort of synonymous. And here it's important to see whether the meaning is broader or narrower. Because if it's broader, then we de-accent it. If it's narrower, then we accent it. And the example we got here on the handout is with the question, do you like dogs? Do you like dogs? One possible answer is, I like all animals. Notice that animals is de-accented because it includes dogs. I like all animals. On the other hand, if I say, do you like dogs? And you answer, well, I like spaniels. Well, I like spaniels. A spaniel is a kind of dog, but it's making it narrower. The implication is that I can't stand Pekingese, or I don't like some other kinds of dog. And so there, the nucleus goes on it. If I say to you, do you like shellfish? And you want to answer, I like lobster. Would you put the nucleus on lobster? What do you like?
Lobster.
I like lobster, yes, it's narrower. But if I say, do you like shellfish? I like all kinds of fish. Or, I like all kinds of fish. If I say to you, will Tuesday be all right? And you want to say, any day would do. Where would you put the nucleus? Any day would do. It's a wider meaning. All right. It may look like common sense, but it's interesting once you think about it. This information, by the way, is not to be found in O'Connor and Arnold's introduction to the intonation of colloquial English, intonation of English, and it's one of the main drawbacks of that book that it doesn't give a proper discussion of the problem of locating the nucleus. And I think really this represents the major advance that there has been in the 25 or 30 years since O'Connor and Arnold did their book. And it's been a collaborative effort with Brazel and Halliday and Gussenov and various other people. Turn over the page. Do you get on well with Chris? Do you get on well with Chris? Chris is the nucleus. Answer, I get on well with most of my colleagues. Well, Chris is one of your colleagues. So colleague has a broader meaning than Chris. So we don't accent it. I get on well with most of my colleagues. Not only Chris, but others as well. On the other hand, if I ask, do you get on well with your colleagues? Get on well with your colleagues. You might say, well, I do with Chris, but not with someone else. Well, I do with Chris. Notice, by the way, that we typically use a full rise intonation here, but that belongs to a later lecture. Now, 3.6, vocatives. A vocative is when you address someone by name. At the beginning of a sentence, vocatives are usually accented. Matthew, where are you going? Because I want to attract Matthew's attention. Matthew. Or I want to indicate that of the various people present, it's Matthew that I'm talking to. Matthew, where are you going? However, if we wait until the end of the sentence, that's usually because it's quite clear who the message is intended for, and it's just a bit of politeness to include the person's name. So it's de-accented. We say, where are you going, Matthew? Where are you going, Matthew? Where are you going, Matthew? What's the time, Mr. Smith? When we teach people tone languages, and we want to teach them to make a low level, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, this is the device we use. We make them imagine that the words they've got to say are someone's name, and they've got to put it after good morning. So, if they've got to practice in some foreign language, Madaga, as a low-level sequence, they say, good morning, Madaga. And then we've got that low level. Because this is the place where English speakers can reliably produce a sequence of low-level tones. All right, vocatives at the end of an utterance. Look at the next example. This is my brother, Tony. There I'm talking to somebody called Tony, and I'm introducing my brother to him. What would it mean if I said, this is my brother, Tony? Then Tony is the name of my brother. Yes. So it has a real difference of meaning. This is my brother, Tony. Then I'm talking to somebody else, and I'm introducing my brother, whose name is Tony. There's one further subtle difference. If I say, this is my brother, Tony, I have more than one brother, and this is the one whose name is Tony. The difference there was, this is my brother Tony, one single tone unit, nucleus on Tony, as against this is my brother, new tone unit, Tony, two separate nuclei, and then that means, by the way, his name is Tony. This is my brother, one bit of information, his name is Tony, next bit of information. Okay. Speakers of Spanish might like to notice that in English, things like he said, she asked, they replied, are unaccented in English when they come at the end. What's the time, she asked? In Spanish, I think you sometimes accent those. What's the time, she asked? Can't do that in English. What's the time, she asked? When do you get back, he said. I'm not sure, he replied. Okay, these narrative expressions are de-accented at the end, just like vocatives. Okay, so we've been looking at this so far in terms of things that we de-accent, that we remove the accent from. The most obvious case of a nucleus not on the last item, though, arises in what's known as contrastive stressing. And this is when we want to draw a contrast, when we want to draw attention to a contrast we're making. And the nuclear accent then shows which item we want to focus attention on. First type of example, 4.1. If we want to focus attention on yes versus no, on positive versus negative, then we put the nucleus on the word that carries that information, which will normally be the auxiliary verb or the modal verb. So if I say, you don't like Mozart, do you? You could answer, I do like Mozart. I do like Mozart. Well, of course, like Mozart is given. Do is a function word, but nevertheless, because it carries the indication of positive, not negative, we emphasize it. We put the nucleus on it. Conversely, if I say, I'm sure you love Mozart, you might say, I don't love Mozart. You could say, I can't stand Mozart, in which case it would understand. But if you did it with the words like Mozart, it would be, I don't like Mozart. Second example, somebody says, Dominic can swim 10 metres. Answer, he can't swim 10 metres. Don't be ridiculous. Might be with a rising tone, he can't swim 10 metres. But the nucleus then on can't, because it bears the polarity, the negative. And this, in fact, is the reason that we quite often put a nucleus on contracted negatives. This might seem a little bit illogical. Logically, the nucleus ought to go on the nt part. If we want to emphasize, you've made a mistake. I haven't. You'd think that nt would be the important thing. I have because have is repeated. But nt can't get an stress, and therefore can't get an accent. So we have to put the accent on the whole contracted negative, haven't. This is very perverse in English. You would expect us to not use a contracted negative and to accent not, and say I have not. Well, you get this in some regional kinds of English, Irish English in particular, but in English and American English, you've made a mistake. I haven't, it goes on to have. So the word that carries the polarity, positive or negative, is the word that gets the nucleus. If you say to me, I'm sorry, you're busy, I could say, oh no, I'm not busy. I'm not busy. There's the nucleus on not. That carries the polarity, negative versus positive. Busy, of course, is repeated. We also put the nucleus on auxiliaries, modals, when we want to emphasize the tense of the verb, the time in question. So I might ask, does Billy keep himself fit? Does Billy keep himself fit? Well, he did manage to until his operation. Now there, we're drawing a contrast between he did, but now he doesn't. He did manage to doesn't add any more information, it means succeeded in doing so. Well, he did manage to until his operation. First nucleus on did. Do you like dogs? Well, I used to like dogs. Used to, but not now. Well, I used to like dogs until I got bitten. Well, I used to like dogs. Again, if somebody says to you, do you like dogs? And you answer, well, I used to like dogs. The only inference you can make is that you didn't understand the question, because your intonation is nonsensical in those circumstances. 4.3 pronouns. Again, speakers of Spanish must be careful in English not to accent pronouns unless there's some reason to do so. If there is a reason to do so, then you can accent them, and they may well have the nucleus. So when we want to emphasize the difference between different pronouns, different persons, I know what I like, but what do you like? I know what I like, but what do you like? I know what I like, but what do you like? We're drawing the contrast between me and you. Like is given in both cases. And in general, we can say that when function words are accented, this is usually because of a contrast that we want to make. Now, next point, 5, broad, narrow focus. We can focus the listener's attention on the whole of what we're saying, or we can focus on just a limited part of it. The nucleus goes at the end of the part we're focusing on, but it doesn't necessarily make clear how much of it we're focusing on. You can indicate how much of it you're focusing on by where you put the onset, because we focus on everything from the onset up to the nucleus. So, if I say, what does Michael do? You could answer, he writes novels. Now there the onset, he writes, novels is the nucleus, and so we're focusing on the whole of that, he writes novels. Both words are important. On the other hand, if you were to say to me, does Michael write plays? Does Michael write plays? Now I don't want to focus on write anymore because that's given. I can say, no, he writes novels. No, he writes novels. And there I don't have an onset, I don't have any accent on writes because it's given. No, he writes novels. I focus narrowly on the novels. Nucleus is in the same place, but there's a difference in what other words are accented. So this general point about de-accenting repeated items and so on is to do with focusing on things or not focusing on them. We don't focus on things that are already known. And you can have implications not just for the nucleus, but also for other accents, including in particular the onset. Third possibility, does Michael read novels? Answer, well, I don't know, but he certainly writes novels. I don't know, but he certainly writes novels. Now then, novels is repeated, doesn't need to be focused on, but writes does need to be focused on, so the nucleus goes there. Does Michael read novels? I don't know, but he certainly writes novels. Alright, let's move on now to section 6. This is what phoneticians all enjoy. We have great fun trying to work out what the grammatical things there are about certain sentences that cause them to have a nucleus in an unexpected place. You hear brr, 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 you say, the phone's ringing. Now, this isn't really because ringing is given, we can hear the ringing. Because if you, for some reason, you were out of the room, you couldn't hear it at all, I could call out to you, the phone's ringing. So, our previous explanation is not sufficient. It's not that ringing is already given or already known. Equally, we might say, Kim Il-sung has died. Somebody said that to me 3 or 4 weeks ago. Why do we not put the nucleus on died? You think that that should be new information. It is new information. I didn't know previously. Nevertheless, this is what we do. We say, Kim Il-sung has died. What's the news? What's the latest news? Kim Il-sung has died. If I see that you embarrassingly have got a gap at the front of your trousers, I might say, your zip's undone. Undone is new information. That's the whole point of my saying it. So why don't we put the nucleus there? We don't. We put it on zip. The other example here, you set off to go for a drive, you come in infuriated, the car won't start. I can't get the car to start. Why don't we emphasize start? Because that's new information. Well, all we can say is it seems to be something about intransitive sentences, sentences with no object for the verb, and they describe an event rather than a situation. Furthermore, this happens only if the subject is fully lexical, that is, the subject is a noun or a noun phrase including a noun, not, for example, a pronoun. Compare, well, the car's running well. The car's running well. Now there, the nucleus will go on well. Because that describes a general situation. The event is the car won't start. milkman's at the door. The milkman's at the door. That's an event. Nucleus on milkman. The milkman's brought 3 pints. The milkman's bought 3 pints. That somehow doesn't count as an event in the same way. Anyhow, it's got an object. So the nucleus goes on pints. The milkman's late. That's not an event, that's a statement of the situation. The nucleus goes on late. The milkman's late. Crash! The ceiling's fallen in. Disasters. These event sentences do tend to refer to disasters of one kind and another. When everything is in order, then we don't get this strange tonicity with the early nucleus. So I might come in annoyed. The cat's been sick. There's a mess on the carpet. The cat's been sick. All right, there's an event, a disaster, if you like, nucleus on the cat. But the cat's sitting outside. Nucleus on outside. That's not an event, that's a normal situation. Okay, that's one type. 6.2, another type, very interesting for us, the tacticians. When we have a noun phrase object, there are various circumstances in English when it gets fronted, moved to the front of the sentence. And quite often when this happens, it gets the nucleus. So if we're talking about television, and last night's television, I might say to you, which program did you watch? Which program did you watch? Now, this of course relates to a sentence, I watched a program, or you watched a program. Normal place of the object is at the end. Last content word gets the nucleus. When we then do the WH fronting, which program, it seems to often bring the nucleus with it, with the interesting implication for the ordering of the decisions that we make about these things. Which program did you watch? This only happens if you've got a full noun. It doesn't happen in the case of dummies or pronouns, so we could say, which one did you watch? Or which one did you like best? Now, which one, that's not a full noun. Which program did you like best? But which one did you like best? Program rejects the nucleus, one rejects it. Next example, what kind of hat should I wear? What kind of hat should I wear? You ask, you can't decide. What kind of hat should I wear? Well, this relates to a sentence, I've got to wear a hat. I've got to wear some kind of hat. And you're going to front the WH element, what kind, some kind becomes what kind, and that constituent, some kind of hat, what kind of hat, then still gets the nucleus, as it would have had in the underlying sentence, I've got to wear a hat. Third example, the teacher's given us a problem to solve. The teacher's given us a problem to solve. Why don't we say the teacher's given us a problem to solve? Well, you could say that, but it would be unusual. Again, we can say that the teacher says, solve this problem. It's a problem to solve. And solve this problem, nucleus on problem, it remains on problem when we say it's a problem to solve. There's a well-known minimal pair that some people quote, George gave Helen directions to follow. That means he told her to follow, as against George gave Helen directions to follow. She's got to follow the directions. So it's the NP object, the full lexical NP object, that attracts the nucleus. 6.3, last point, in broad focus, final adverb. verbs. And final adverbial phrases are often de-accented, particularly when they refer to time. So, they're coming to dinner tomorrow. Tomorrow there is a time adverb. I might say there's a party on Friday. There's a party on Friday. On Friday there's a time adverb. I might say, will you be having fish for supper? Will you be having fish for supper? Now, for supper is an adverb, not one of time, but nevertheless that too tends to be de-accented. As we shall see later on, there's another possibility, which is to have two nuclei with a fall plus rise pattern, in which case the fall goes on this earlier word, and the rise, which is of less importance, goes on the adverb. So you could say they'll be coming to dinner tomorrow. Dinner tomorrow, fall plus rise. There's a party on Friday. Party, there's a party. Plus on Friday. Let's finish by doing a worked example, which I will write after you. Get my microphone over here. Now, supposing we're talking about going to the theatre. Yesterday we were discussing what play we should go and see, and we thought it would be nice if we could get some tickets for Cats. Today, you come in and you want to know, did I succeed? Where will you put the Nucleus?
Take it.
Yes, I can hear somebody with the right answer. Get. Because in that case, if we've already been talking about it, Cats is given, tickets is given, your and for are function words, so get, you'll have a yes. Did you get your tickets to Cats? Answer, no. You were right when you said there'd be a queue. Well, we're putting a nucleus on the no, of course, that's the first one. Where will the next nucleus go? You were right when you said there'd be a queue. Or possibly with another one, fall plus rise. You were right when you said there'd be a queue. Because the implication, of course, is that you said this yesterday, so it's not new information. So the nucleus goes on the last bit of new information, which is right. It was hopeless. No problem there. That's the answer. Hopeless. Back to the first speaker. I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything else at the theatre that you'd like to see?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to hear that. Or, I'm getting to do with the fall plus rise, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything else at the theatre that you'd like to see?
Yes.
Else? Is there anything else at the theatre that you'd like to see? Well, you know that Cats is something at the theatre that you'd like to see. So, at the theatre that you'd like to see is all given. Nucleus goes from the last word, is new information, which, if you can read my writing, is else. Is there anything else at the theatre that you'd like to see? Well, I'm sure you can do plenty more practice on that sort of problem in your practical classes. Thank you very much.